think a lot of times it's hard to remember that your thoughts aren't you. You know, the things that come into our brain, the voice in our head, although it's internal, it's not you. Your thoughts are just an echo chamber of this internal monologue that we listen to on a daily basis. Sometimes it's frantic, sometimes it's calm, sometimes it's quiet. But one thing that we failed to remember is that that's not you. You know, it's a part of our consciousness, but it's not you as a person. A lot of times, our internal monologue is driven by how we feel. It's the perpetuation of our emotions and our mental state. So, when you're in a negative state or train of thought, that internal monologue is going to be feeding into that negativity. And when you're in a positive state, that internal monologue could also still be trying to feed into the negative. And I think a lot of times it's hard to quiet or make quiet that internal monologue. You know, there's so much noise that it's hard to find clarity in yourself because there's this little voice in your head that just won't leave you alone. You know, the internal monologue can be almost torturing to the point where you can't sleep, or you know, you can't go a day without having some thought or some train of thought that is just overtly negative and it's dragging you down. And sometimes we think, well, that's me, this is me, this is my thoughts, but it's not you. Your internal monologue is a collection and reflection of your current status, your environment, your mental state, how you feel. It's a reflection of all of that, and it's going to feed into that cycle, that process of this is where I'm at, and you know, my internal monologue is going to be a reflection of that. But again, it's hard to differentiate between the thoughts and the self. You know, I can have thoughts that I look back at and say, well, that's horrific. Like, you know, who thinks that? Or no one, I wouldn't say that, but I thought it. But that doesn't make me a bad person. You know, it's just a fleeting thought. It's nothing. It's the little voice in your head, but again, it's not you. And that monologue can drive the way that we act. It can drive the way that we feel, how we interact with the world, how we see the world, how we see ourselves. You know, if we allow a destructive internal monologue of not being worthy or not being good enough for something, you're going to keep feeding into that constant loop and cycle, because you're going to get used to the thoughts of not being good enough, and that monologue isn't going to change. And although those thoughts aren't you, they can drive who you become. It's very easy to remain in that mindset, to allow that monologue to drive you. But you have to make a choice where you don't let your thoughts shape you. You have to make your own decision to be better and not let your mind run you, but you run your mind. You are the master of yourself. You have to become the master of your own mind, of your own body. You have to be the master of self. And part of that means trying to interject with your monologue, challenging yourself internally and not feeding into whatever negativity your mind's trying to feed you. It's an active decision and choice. It's a conscious decision every day to not let your mind get the better of you. Our minds are inherently negative. In today's day and age, the human mind is not built on positivity. It's not. It's almost like we've evolved to become negative creatures, and we're creatures of habit. So, habitual tendencies of negativity is just going to feed into a constant cycle. And you are your environment, and your mind is part of that environment. If you allow yourself to remain unhappy and you feed into your own monologue of negativity and pessimism without any, optimism or positive perspective on anything outside of yourself, how do you think that you're going to view anything with any light or positivity? You can't. It's all about, like I said, interjecting those negative thoughts and reminding yourself of who you are and who you want to be. And I can tell you now, you don't want to be a negative person. I don't think anyone truly desires to be negative. That is it's a very sad way to live. It's a sad way to view the world. People who are miserable, they don't want to be. At least not in my opinion or experience. But they allow themselves to be, and it's much harder to pull yourself out of a negative place than it is to fight to be in a better one. Sometimes it's easier to stay and remain still in pain and negativity than it is to decide to make a change, because the negativity is comfortable and it's known. Challenging yourself is hard, and no one can do it for you but you. You are the only person who can make that change, which means it's the hardest thing to do because it's an internal battle. Sometimes the mindset shift is so powerful and so unknown that you can't even communicate it. You can't even articulate what you're trying to do or how you're trying to shape yourself, because it's such a surreal thing to change the way that your internal dialogue and monologue works. It's not a simple feat. It's different to any sort of physical transformation. It's evolution. It's becoming an elevated version of yourself. And I think that any transformation should start mentally. And part of that is remembering that your thoughts aren't you. And just keeping in mind how much power you really have. And you have to decide if you want to be the master of yourself, or if you want your mind to be the master of you. That was a very big rant. I am trying to be more consistent with these. Not many people have seen my first video about getting out of your own way, and that's okay. I'm not doing this for fame or money or views. I just want a platform where I can share my internal thoughts and have conscious conversations. That's why I named this channel Conscious Conversations, because I like talking about these topics and trying to let myself evolve through my own thoughts and speech and vocalizing it rather than keeping it internal. So, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. I'll see you next time.